I learned the hard way that some people really don't think about consequences until they're staring directly at them. My name is Ryan Whitmore, and I've been living in the Cascade Ridge community in northern Wisconsin for 6 years now. It's a small neighborhood, maybe 40 houses total, nestled right up against some serious backcountry terrain. I moved here after my divorce because the property was cheap and the work was good. I run a small snow removal business, and up here in the frozen north, that means I'm basically essential from November through March. I've got contracts with the county, several businesses in town, and most importantly, I'm the only guy within 30 miles who plows residential driveways with any kind of reliability. The other operators either work exclusively for the state or they're too far out to make house calls practical. When I bought my place, the HOA seemed reasonable enough. The fees were low, the rules were basic stuff about keeping your lawn maintained and not painting your house neon pink. I signed the papers, moved in, and mostly forgot the HOA even existed. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was assuming that just because I'd been parking my snowmobile in my driveway for 6 winters without complaint, it would stay that way forever. It was a Tuesday morning in early January when everything went sideways. I'd been up since 3 in the morning clearing the main routes after an 8-inch overnight dump. The temperature was sitting at about 5 degrees, and the wind made it feel like someone was sandblasting your face with ice every time you stepped outside. I got home around 9, exhausted, covered in snow, and ready to grab a few hours of sleep before the next wave of clients started calling. That's when I noticed my driveway was empty. My Arctic Cat snowmobile, the one I used for getting back to some of the more remote properties when the roads were impassable, was gone. Not stolen, I realized after a moment of panic, but towed. There was a bright orange sticker plastered on my garage door that hadn't been there when I left. Notice of violation, it read in aggressive block letters. Your vehicle has been removed from the property due to multiple violations of Cascade Ridge HOA Bylaws Section 7, Paragraph 4. No recreational vehicles may be stored in driveways or visible from the street. Additionally, complaints have been filed regarding excessive noise violations during early morning hours. Your vehicle is being held at Morrison's Towing, 1847 Highway 51. You may retrieve it after paying applicable fines and towing fees. Further violations will result in additional penalties. I stood there in my driveway, so tired I could barely think straight, reading this notice 3 times before my brain could fully process what had happened. They'd towed my snowmobile, the snowmobile I needed for work. The snowmobile that, yes, I sometimes started early in the morning because that's when I needed to use it to do my job. I pulled out my phone and called Morrison's Towing. A bored-sounding woman answered on the 4th ring. "Yeah, we got a snowmobile here," she confirmed. Towing fee is $200, storage is $50 a day, and there's an HOA fine of $500 that needs to be paid before release. $750, I said, my voice rising. "For my work vehicle. That's what it says here. You can take it up with your HOA. We just do what they authorize." I hung up and immediately called the HOA office. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. I left a message that was probably less professional than it should have been, then tried to call again. Still voicemail, fine. I'd go there in person. The Cascade Ridge HOA office was located in a converted garage at the front of the neighborhood. It was only staffed 3 days a week, and naturally, Tuesday wasn't one of them. There was a number posted on the door for emergencies. I called it. "Hello," a woman's voice, sharp and nasal. "Hi, this is Ryan Whitmore from 847 Birch Lane. Someone towed my snowmobile this morning and I need to get it back. It's my work vehicle. Mr. Whitmore, yes. I'm Barbara Pennington, the HOA president. I authorized that tow myself. Of course her name was Barbara. Of course it was. You towed my work vehicle without any warning, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I use that for my business. I have jobs scheduled for today. Mr. Whitmore, you've been in violation of our bylaws for quite some time. We've had numerous complaints about the noise from your machine at unreasonable hours, and storing a recreational vehicle in your driveway is explicitly prohibited. It's not recreational, it's for work. And what complaints? I've never received any notices about this. We sent multiple notices to your address over the past month. I never got any notices. That's not our problem. The bylaws are very clear. No recreational vehicles in driveways. No excessive noise before 7 a.m. You've violated both repeatedly. I took a deep breath. Look, Barbara, I understand there are rules, but that snowmobile is how I get to some of my clients when the roads are too bad for my truck. I'm literally the only Plow driver who services this area reliably. I need it back today. Then you'll need to pay the fines and agree to keep the vehicle properly stored out of sight. We have community standards to maintain. $750 in fines and fees with no warning in the middle of winter for my work vehicle. Do you understand how insane that is? Her voice went cold. Mr. Whitmore, I don't appreciate your tone. The rules apply to everyone equally. If you can't follow them, perhaps this community isn't the right fit for you. I've lived here for 6 years without any problems. And we've been too lenient. That changes now. Pay your fines, move your vehicle to a garage or storage facility, and there won't be any further issues. I don't have a storage facility. My garage is full of equipment for my business. And I can't just come up with $750 because you decided to enforce a rule you've ignored for 6 years. Then I suggest you figure something out. Good day, Mr. Whitmore. She hung up. I stood there in the cold, phone still pressed to my ear, trying to process what had just happened. Then my phone rang. It was Mrs. Chen from over on Maple Street. Ryan, hi, I'm so sorry to bother you, but my driveway is completely snowed in and I have a doctor's appointment at 11. Any chance you could come by? I closed my eyes. Mrs. Chen, I'm dealing with a situation right now. I'm going to need to call you back. Oh, of course, dear. No rush. Well, a little rush. The appointment is important, but I'm sure I can reschedule if you're busy. Give me an hour. I'll figure something out. I hung up and called my buddy Derek, who lived 2 towns over and had helped me out with work before. No answer. Then I tried Mike, another guy who did occasional plowing, straight to voicemail. Everyone was slammed because of last night's snow. My phone rang again. Then again. 5 more calls in 10 minutes, all clients who needed their driveways cleared. I had to tell every single one that I was running behind. The frustration in their voices made my chest tight. I couldn't work without my snowmobile. The back section of the Pine Ridge estate was inaccessible by truck. The Johnsons' hunting cabin could only be reached by sled. 3 of my regular clients specifically hired me because I could get to them no matter how bad the roads were. I drove to Morrison's Towing anyway, just to see if maybe I could negotiate something. The lot was a muddy, half-frozen mess surrounded by a chain-link fence. My Arctic cat was sitting near the back, looking cold and abandoned. A guy in a grease-stained coat came out of the office building. Help you. That's my snowmobile. I need to get it out. Sure, $750. I don't have $750 right now. This is my work vehicle. I need it to do my job, he shrugged. Can't help you, man. We don't get paid until you get paid. HOA has the authorization. We're just the middle guy. Can I at least move it to a payment plan or something? Would have to take that up with the HOA. We just hold it until they tell us to release it. I stood there looking at my snowmobile through the fence, then got back in my truck and drove home. I spent the next 3 hours doing what work I could with just the plow truck, but I had to turn down 4 jobs that required the sled. That was about $600 in lost income, just for one day. That evening, I did something I probably should have done 6 years ago. I actually read through the entire HOA bylaws document. It was 47 pages of the most tedious, nitpicky nonsense I'd ever seen. The recreational vehicle clause was buried in Section 7, and it did technically prohibit storing them in driveways. There was an exception for vehicles actively being loaded or unloaded for immediate use, but that was vague enough to be useless. The noise ordinance was even worse. Excessive or unreasonable noise before 7 a.m. was prohibited, but there was no definition of what counted as excessive or unreasonable. Lawn mowers, snow blowers, vehicles starting up, it was all subjective. I drafted an appeal letter that night, outlining why my snowmobile was a work vehicle, not recreational, and why I sometimes needed to use it before 7 a.m. I drove to the HOA office the next morning and slid it under the door. Barbara called me that afternoon. "Mr. Whitmore, I received your letter. I appreciate you taking the time to explain your situation, but the board's decision stands. The bylaws don't make exceptions for work vehicles that happen to look like recreational vehicles, and the noise complaints are from multiple residents. We can't simply ignore them." "Who complained?" I asked. "I'd like to talk to them, explain what I'm doing." "We don't reveal the identities of complainants. That's policy." "So anonymous complaints are enough to tow someone's work vehicle and fine them $750. The complaints weren't anonymous to us. They're anonymous to you. And yes, when bylaws are being violated, we take action." "Barbara, please, I'm not trying to be difficult, but I need that snowmobile for work. Can we work out any kind of compromise? I'll try to be quieter in the mornings. I'll park it behind my truck so it's less visible. Something. The compromise is that you follow the rules like everyone else. Store your vehicle appropriately and don't create noise disturbances. It's very simple." "I don't have anywhere to store it. Then you'll need to make arrangements." "I'm sorry, but this isn't negotiable." She hung up again. I sat at my kitchen table doing the math. I had about $400 in my checking account. My mortgage was due in 2 weeks. I had truck payments, insurance, business expenses. Coming up with an extra $750 would mean going into credit card debt or missing other payments. My phone rang. It was Tom Sanders, who owned a small resort about 15 miles up into the backcountry. "Ryan, hey, I've got a situation. The access road to the resort is completely buried. County says they can't get to it until next week. I've got guests coming in Friday. Any chance you can help me out?" "What's the access road like?" 2 miles, pretty rough terrain, lots of drifts. You'd need the sled for sure." I exhaled slowly. "Tom, I've got a problem. My HOA towed my snowmobile. I'm trying to get it back, but it's complicated." "Towed it? Why?" "Long story. Bylaw violations, noise complaints. I'm working on it." "Ryan, I need that road clear by Thursday. I'll pay double your usual rate. This is kind of desperate." Double rate for a 2-mile backcountry access road would be about $800. Enough to get my sled back and then some. If I can get my snowmobile back by tomorrow, I'll do it. "That would be amazing. Thank you. Keep me posted." I hung up and called Barbara again. Voicemail. I left a message explaining that I had a job that would pay enough to cover the fines, but I needed the snowmobile released to do the job. I asked her to please call me back as soon as possible. She didn't call back that day. The next morning, I woke up to a fresh 6 inches of snow and a phone that wouldn't stop ringing. Everyone needed their driveways cleared, and I was already behind from yesterday. I worked from dawn until 2 in the afternoon, then tried Barbara again. Still voicemail. I drove to the HOA office. Still closed. I sat in my truck in the parking lot and called every board member listed on the HOA website. 3 of them didn't answer. One told me this was Barbara's department and I'd need to speak with her. The last one, a guy named Richard, at least seemed sympathetic. "Look, Ryan, I hear you. But Barbara's the president. She makes the calls on enforcement. I can bring it up at the next board meeting, but that's not until the end of the month. Richard, I need my snowmobile back now. I'm losing work every day, it's impounded. Can't you do anything? I'll talk to Barbara, okay?" That's all I can promise. Tom Sanders called me that evening. "Ryan, I hate to push, but I really need an answer. Can you clear that access road, or do I need to try to find someone else?" "I'm working on it, Tom. Give me until tomorrow morning. Tomorrow's Thursday. The road needs to be clear by end of day." "I understand. I'll call you first thing." I didn't sleep well that night. I kept running through scenarios in my head, trying to figure out any possible way to make this work. Finally, around 2 in the morning, I made a decision that was probably stupid but felt necessary. I drove to Morrison's Towing, parked down the street, and walked up to the fence. The lot was dark, no one around. The fence was about 8 feet tall, chain link with barbed wire at the top. My snowmobile was sitting maybe 20 feet inside the fence. I stood there for 10 minutes considering. This was theft. It was my own property, but legally the impound was authorized. Taking it would be a crime. I could get arrested. My business could be ruined. On the other hand, I'd done nothing wrong. I'd been using a work vehicle for work, and an overzealous HOA president had arbitrarily decided to enforce a rule that had been ignored for years, without warning, in the middle of winter, costing me thousands of dollars in lost income. I was about to do something incredibly stupid when headlights swung into the lot. I ducked behind a tree, heart pounding. A Morrison's Towing truck pulled in, and the same grease-stained guy from before got out, unlocked the gate, and drove inside. He was there for maybe 5 minutes before leaving again, locking up behind him. That was enough to snap me back to reality. I walked back to my truck and drove home. Thursday morning, I called Tom Sanders and told him I couldn't do the job. He was disappointed but understanding. That was $800 I just turned down because I didn't have access to my own equipment. I spent the day doing what work I could. Then that evening I sat down and wrote out every single expense I'd incurred since the snowmobile was towed. Lost income, rescheduled jobs, the clients I'd had to turn away. It came to just over $2,000 in 3 days. I added that to the appeal letter and sent it to the entire HOA board. Friday morning, Barbara finally called me back. "Mr. Whitmore, I received your letter. I'm going to be very clear with you. The board is not going to reimburse you for income you claim to have lost. You violated the bylaws, you faced consequences, and any financial impact is the result of your own choices. If you'd followed the rules to begin with, none of this would have happened." "Barbara, I didn't know I was violating anything. I never received any warnings. We sent notices. I never got them. And even if you did send them, don't you think towing someone's work vehicle without a final warning is excessive? The notices were your warnings. We're done being lenient with violations." Something about her tone made me pause. "We're done being lenient. What does that mean?" "It means the board has decided to take a more active role in enforcing community standards. We've let too many things slide for too long. That ends now." "So I'm what, an example? You're a resident who needs to follow the rules like everyone else. Fine, I'll pay the fines. but I want to see these notices you supposedly sent. I want proof they were mailed to my address." There was a pause. "I'll have to look into that." "You do that. And while you're at it, I want the names of the people who complained about noise. If I'm being fined based on complaints, I have a right to know who made them. We've already been over this. We don't reveal complainant identities. Then how do I know the complaints are even real?" Her voice went icy. "Are you accusing me of making false reports?" "I'm asking for basic transparency. I've been hit with $750 in fines, and I've lost over $2,000 in income. The least you can do is show me that this is actually based on real complaints and real notices." "Mr. Whitmore, your attitude is not helping your situation." "My attitude? Barbara, you've cost me thousands of dollars in the middle of winter with no warning. You've impounded my work vehicle and you won't provide any evidence that proper procedure was followed. What kind of attitude should I have?" "I think we're done here." "I think we're not. I want to see those notices. I want to see the complaints. And I want to attend the next board meeting to formally appeal this." "Board meetings are for board members only." "Are you serious? Residents can't attend HOA board meetings. Residents can submit written appeals. The board reviews them and issues decisions." "That's not transparent at all. How is anyone supposed to have a voice in how this community is run? The board was elected to make decisions on behalf of the community. If you don't like how we're doing our jobs, run for the board yourself next election." "When's the next election?" 18 months. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I took a breath and tried one more time. "Barbara, please. I'm trying to work with you here. Can we just find some kind of middle ground? I need my snowmobile back for work. I'll pay the towing fees. Can we at least waive the HOA fines while we sort this out?" "No. The fines stand. Pay them and follow the bylaws or face further action. Those are your options." She hung up. I sat there feeling something shift inside me. Up until that moment, I'd been frustrated and angry, but I'd been trying to work within the system. Now, I realized the system was rigged. Barbara wasn't interested in being reasonable. She was interested in control. Fine. If that's how she wanted to play it, I could play too. I started by doing research. I pulled up every Wisconsin statute related to HOA governance. I read through case law about improper towing. I looked into what constitutes proper notice and due process. Then I started documenting everything. Every conversation with Barbara, every call from clients I had to turn away, every dollar of lost income. Saturday morning, I got a call from Mrs. Chen. "Ryan, I'm so sorry to bother you again, but my driveway is just getting worse. I haven't been able to get my car out all week. I missed 2 doctor appointments. Is there any chance you could help me?" Mrs. Chen, of course. "I'll be there in an hour." "Oh, thank you so much. I tried calling those other services, but they're all booked up or they say my driveway is too steep for their trucks." I cleared Mrs. Chen's driveway and she paid me in cash with an extra 20 as a tip. As I was getting ready to leave, she stopped me. "Ryan, is everything okay? You seem stressed." I almost brushed it off, but then figured what the hell. The HOA towed my snowmobile, bylaw violations. Now I can't get to half my clients and I can't afford to get it out of impound. Her eyes went wide. "They towed your snowmobile, the one you use for work." "That's the one." "That's ridiculous. Who authorized that?" "Barbara Pennington." Mrs. Chen's expression darkened. "Of course it was. That woman is a menace. Do you know she tried to fine my son for parking in my driveway overnight? Said visitors aren't allowed to park on the street and also aren't allowed in driveways between midnight and 6 a.m. Where exactly was he supposed to park? Sounds about right. She's been going after everyone lately. The Johnsons got fined for having their Christmas lights up past January 1st. The Martins got cited for having the wrong shade of mailbox. It's getting out of control. That got my attention. How many people has she been targeting? Oh, dozens, I think. There's been a lot of talk about it. Most people just pay the fines because it's easier than fighting, but people are getting fed up. An idea started forming. Mrs. Chen, do you think people would come to a meeting if I organized one, just residents, no HOA, to talk about what's been going on? She nodded immediately. Absolutely. I'll help you spread the word. I spent the rest of the weekend knocking on doors and making calls. The response was overwhelming. Almost everyone I talked to had a story about Barbara. Excessive fines, arbitrary enforcement, rules that seemed designed just to harass people. The Hendersons had been cited for their lawn being a quarter-inch too long. The Kowalskis got fined for having a small oil stain on their driveway. The Petersons were told their mailbox was 3 inches too far from the curb. We organized a meeting at the community center for Tuesday evening. I put up flyers and sent emails. I wasn't sure what to expect, but when Tuesday came around, over 30 residents showed up. That was more than 3/4 of the neighborhood. I stood up in front of the room, nervous but determined. Thanks everyone for coming. I think we all know why we're here. The HOA, specifically Barbara Pennington, has been overstepping. I wanted to bring everyone together to talk about what we can do about it. For the next 2 hours, people shared their experiences. It was worse than I'd realized. Barbara had been on a crusade for months, issuing fines for the most minor infractions imaginable. Some people had been hit with thousands of dollars in penalties. One elderly couple was considering selling their house because they couldn't keep up with the demands. Can we remove her from the board? Someone asked. I'd looked into this. According to the bylaws, we can call a special election if 20% of residents sign a petition. We've got way more than that here tonight. Let's do it, Mrs. Chen said. I'll get the petition started. We drafted it that night and started collecting signatures. By the end of the week, we had 37 signatures calling for Barbara's removal and a special election for a new board. I filed the petition with the HOA according to the procedures in the bylaws. Barbara had 15 days to respond and set an election date. Her response came in 11 days. It was a single sentence. Petition denied due to improper formatting. I read it 3 times. Improper formatting. The bylaws didn't specify any particular format. They just said 20% of residents had to sign a petition calling for a special election. I called Barbara. Voicemail. I emailed. No response. Finally, I went to the HOA office during posted hours. She was there, sitting behind a desk, and when I walked in, her expression was pure smugness. Mr. Whitmore, here to pay your fines. I'm here about the petition. What do you mean improper formatting? The bylaw requires signatures to be notarized. No, it doesn't. I've read Section 12 4 times. It says nothing about notarization. She pulled out a binder and flipped to a page. Section 12, Paragraph 3, Subsection B. All official petitions must be properly formatted according to standard legal documentation practices. That includes notarization. That's not what that means. That's talking about formatting like margins and fonts. It says nothing about requiring a notary. I'm interpreting it to include notarization. The board agrees with my interpretation. So you're just making up requirements to reject a petition you don't like. I'm following the bylaws as written. Barbara, 37 people signed that petition. That's almost the entire neighborhood. You can't just ignore that. I'm not ignoring it. I'm rejecting it on procedural grounds. If you'd like to resubmit with proper notarization, you're welcome to do so. I stared at her. You know what this is? This is you abusing your power because you know you're about to lose it. If that's all, Mr. Whitmore, I have work to do. I left before I said something I'd regret. Getting 37 signatures notarized was a nightmare and an expense, but we did it. It took another week, but we went door to door with a mobile notary and got every single signature officially documented. The total cost was over $200, which I paid out of pocket. I resubmitted the petition. Barbara had 15 days to respond. On day 14, she sent out an email to all residents. The petition for special election has been reviewed by the board. After careful consideration, we have determined that the petition does not meet the requirements set forth in the bylaws. Section 12 requires that 20% of residents call for an election. However, the petition submitted contains signatures from only 37 individuals. Several of these individuals do not qualify as residents under the definition provided in Section 2, Paragraph 7. I immediately pulled up Section 2, Paragraph 7. It defined a resident as a homeowner of record or primary resident of a property within the community boundaries. I called Mrs. Chen. Barbara is saying some of the signatures don't count because people aren't technically residents. Do you know who she might be talking about? Well, my son signed it, but he doesn't live here. Same with the Kowalski's daughter. Oh, and the Martins had their adult nephew sign it. I counted it up. If we removed everyone who didn't technically live in the community full-time, we had 33 signatures. We needed 32 for 20%. We were still good. I sent an email to Barbara pointing this out. She responded that actually, the Petersons' signature didn't count because they were in the process of selling their house. And the Hendersons had recently refinanced, so there was a question about whether they were the current homeowners of record until the paperwork cleared. This was insane. She was inventing reasons to disqualify signatures. I called a lawyer. His name was Martin Hayes, and he specialized in HOA disputes. His initial consultation was free, so I drove to his office in Wausau and laid out everything that had happened. He listened, took notes, and at the end he sat back in his chair. Mr. Whitmore, I'll be straight with you. You have a strong case for improper procedure and selective enforcement. The problem is that fighting an HOA legally is expensive and time-consuming. We're talking thousands of dollars in legal fees and months of court proceedings. Even if you win, collecting damages from a small HOA with limited funds can be difficult. So I should just give up. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you need to think carefully about how much you're willing to invest in this fight. Sometimes the smarter play is to pay the fines, follow the rules as written, and wait for the next election to vote her out. That's 18 months away. And in the meantime, she's going to keep harassing everyone. Probably. But unless you're prepared for a long legal battle, your options are limited. I left his office feeling defeated. The consultation had at least been free, but he was right. I didn't have thousands of dollars to spend on lawyers. I was driving home when my phone rang. Unknown number. Is this Ryan Whitmore, the Plow guy? Yes. This is Karen at the County Highway Department. We've been trying to reach you. We've got a situation. That got my attention. What kind of situation? We've had a major pileup on Highway 51 near the Cascade Ridge area. Multiple vehicles stuck, roads impassable. We need every available piece of equipment out there. Can you help? I can bring my truck. Do you have a snowmobile? We need someone who can get to some stranded vehicles that are off the main road. My jaw clenched. I have one, but it's impounded. Impounded? Why? HOA dispute. Long story. There was a pause. Mr. Whitmore, this is technically an emergency situation. If you need that snowmobile for official county business, I can authorize its release. You can do that. The county has agreements with local towing companies for emergency situations. If Morrison's is holding your vehicle, I can make a call. That would be amazing. Thank you. Give me 20 minutes. Head over to Morrison's and it should be ready for pickup. I pulled a U-turn and drove straight to the towing yard. Sure enough, when I got there, the grease-stained guy was already pulling my Arctic Cat out. County called. You're cleared to take it. No charges. I almost couldn't believe it. The HOA fines too, all of it. County override. You're good to go. I loaded my snowmobile onto my trailer, thanked him about 5 times, and headed to Highway 51. The situation was bad. A semi had jackknifed in the snow, and at least 6 cars had slid off the road trying to avoid it. 2 vehicles were down in a ditch about 50 yards from the highway, and that's where they needed me. I spent the next 4 hours helping pull cars out, transporting stranded drivers back to the road, and clearing paths for emergency vehicles. It was cold, exhausting work, but it felt good to be doing something useful instead of fighting with Barbara. When everything was finally clear, the county supervisor came over and shook my hand. Good work today. We appreciate you coming out. Thanks for getting my sled released. No problem, though I have to say, an HOA impounding your work vehicle sounds like a mess. That legal? According to them, it is. He shook his head. HOA. I've heard stories. Good luck with that. I drove home around midnight, exhausted but relieved to have my snowmobile back. I'd figure out what to do about Barbara later. For now, I needed sleep. I woke up the next morning to my phone ringing. It was Barbara. Mr. Whitmore, I've been informed that you removed your vehicle from impound without paying the fines. The county authorized its release for emergency work. The county doesn't have authority to override HOA penalties. They seem to think they did. Well, they're wrong. You still owe $750 in fines, and now you've violated your impound, which means additional penalties. I'm adding another $500 to your account. Barbara, I was doing emergency work for the county. People were stranded on the highway. You can't fine me for that. I'm fining you for violating the terms of your impound and for continuing to store a recreational vehicle in your driveway. It's not in my driveway. It's in my garage. Then I need to verify that. I'll be by for an inspection this afternoon. An inspection? You can't just come into my garage. Section 9, paragraph 12. The board has the right to inspect properties for compliance with bylaws. I'll be there at 3. She hung up. I called Martin Hayes again. She wants to do an inspection of my garage. Can she do that? Does the bylaw actually say that? Let me check. I pulled up Section 9. Sure enough, buried in paragraph 12 was a clause about property inspections. It says the board may conduct reasonable inspections to ensure compliance with community standards. That's pretty vague. She'd need to give you proper notice, and you have the right to refuse entry to your home. The garage is part of your home. What if I refuse and she fines me? Then we'd have another violation to potentially challenge in court. But again, that's time and money. I hung up and spent the next hour deciding what to do. Part of me wanted to tell Barbara to go to hell, but another part of me was just tired of fighting. I'd gotten my snowmobile back. Maybe the smartest thing was to put it in the garage, keep my head down, and avoid giving her any more ammunition. At 3 o'clock, Barbara showed up with another board member, a mousy-looking guy named Carl. I met them in the driveway. Mr. Whitmore, we're here to verify that your recreational vehicle is being stored appropriately. It's in the garage. We need to see it. I considered refusing, but I knew that would just escalate things. I opened the garage door. My snowmobile was parked in the back, behind my truck and a bunch of equipment. Barbara walked in without asking, looking around like she was inspecting a crime scene. She took photos with her phone. Carl just stood there looking uncomfortable. "This garage is being used for commercial purposes," Barbara announced. "All this equipment, the tools, the supplies, this is a business operation. I run a snow removal business. I need equipment." Section 4, Paragraph 18. Residential properties may not be used for commercial purposes. Are you serious? I don't run the business from my house. I just store equipment here. Storing commercial equipment constitutes commercial use. You're in violation. Barbara, half the people in this neighborhood work from home or store work equipment in their garages. Then they're in violation too. I'll be conducting more inspections. She took a few more photos and then left without another word. That evening, I got an email with 3 new violation notices. Commercial use of residential property, improper storage of equipment, and something about my truck being parked at an improper angle in the driveway, which was apparently blocking the sidewalk by 2 inches. Total fines, $1,200. I sat at my kitchen table staring at my laptop, feeling something break inside me. This wasn't about bylaws anymore. This wasn't about rules or community standards. This was harassment. Barbara had decided I was a problem, and she was going to keep coming after me until I either gave up or moved away. I thought about Martin Hayes' advice. Fighting this legally would cost thousands and take months. I didn't have thousands. But I also didn't have $1,200 for these bogus fines. And even if I paid them, Barbara would just find something else to cite me for. I was trapped. I spent the next few days in a fog, doing my work but barely keeping it together. Clients kept calling and I kept showing up, but my heart wasn't in it. I was exhausted and demoralized and starting to seriously consider selling my house. Then something happened that changed everything. It was Saturday morning and we got hit with a massive storm. Weather Service was calling it a historic snowfall, possibly the biggest in a decade. 2 feet overnight with another foot expected throughout the day. Wind gusts up to 40 miles per hour. Whiteout conditions. The county issued a travel ban. Everything shut down. I woke up to calls from every client I had. Everyone needed their driveways cleared, but nobody could be cleared until the storm passed. I told everyone I'd get to them as soon as it was safe. By noon, the snow was so heavy I could barely see across the street. The wind was howling. My truck was buried in the driveway, and then my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Whitmore, this is Deputy Collins with the Sheriff's Department. We have a situation and we need your help." "What's going on?" "We have an elderly resident in the Cascade Ridge area who's having a medical emergency. Ambulance can't get through because the roads are completely impassable. We need someone with a snowmobile who can get to her and assess the situation until we can get emergency services through." "Who is it?" "A Miss Barbara Pennington, 412 Oak Drive." I froze. Of all the people in the world, it had to be her. "Mr. Whitmore, are you there?" "Yeah, I'm here. What's the medical emergency? We're not entirely sure. A neighbor called it in," said Miss Pennington. Called her saying she was having chest pains and difficulty breathing. Could be a heart attack. We need someone there now. Every petty, angry part of me wanted to say no, wanted to tell them to find someone else, wanted to let Barbara face the same helplessness she'd put me through. But I'm not that person. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. "Thank you. I'll meet you at her address." I geared up, fired up the snowmobile, and headed out into the storm. The visibility was terrible. The snow was coming down so hard I could barely see 10 feet ahead. But I knew these roads and I knew how to handle the sled in bad conditions. It took me 15 minutes to get to Barbara's house. A sheriff's SUV was parked in the street, barely visible through the snow. Deputy Collins was waiting by the front door. "She's not answering," he said. "Door's locked." "I'll check the back." I waded through waist-deep snow around the side of the house. The back door was also locked, but there was a window that was partially open. I called through it. "Barbara, it's Ryan Whitmore. The sheriff called me. Are you okay?" A weak voice from inside. "Help." I forced the window open and climbed through. Barbara was on the living room floor, pale and sweating, clutching her chest. She looked up at me, and for a second there was recognition and something like fear in her eyes. "Ambulance is coming," I said. "Can you tell me what's wrong?" "Chest pain. Can't breathe. Started an hour ago." I called to Deputy Collins and he came around back. Together we got Barbara onto her couch and made her as comfortable as we could. I found aspirin in her medicine cabinet and gave it to her, something I remembered about heart attacks from a first aid course I'd taken years ago. "How long until the ambulance gets here?" I asked Collins. "Could be a while. Roads are bad, but they're coming." We waited. Barbara drifted in and out, sometimes conscious, sometimes not. At one point she looked at me, really looked at me, and whispered, "Why did you come?" "Because you needed help. I've been awful to you." "Yeah, you have. I'm sorry." I didn't know what to say to that. This woman had made my life hell for weeks. She'd cost me thousands of dollars, impounded my work vehicle, harassed me with bogus fines. And now she was apologizing while possibly dying on her couch. "Just focus on breathing," I said. "Ambulance will be here soon." It took 45 minutes for the ambulance to arrive. The paramedics came in, assessed Barbara, and loaded her onto a stretcher. They said it looked like a heart attack, but she was stable for now. They'd know more at the hospital. As they were carrying her out, Barbara grabbed my hand. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for coming." I nodded and watched them take her away. Deputy Collins came over to me as I was getting ready to leave. "That was good work. Not everyone would have shown up for someone who's been giving them grief. I'm not going to let someone die just because I don't like them." "Well, it says something about your character. County's going to hear about this." I rode my snowmobile home through the storm, feeling strange and hollow. I wasn't sure what I felt about what had just happened. Relief that Barbara was getting help. Satisfaction that she'd apologized. Anger that it took a medical emergency for her to show any humanity, all of it, maybe. The storm continued for another day. I spent Sunday and Monday clearing driveways, pulling cars out of ditches, helping people get to work and appointments. I was exhausted, but the work kept my mind off everything else. Tuesday evening, I got a call from Carl, the other board member who'd been at the garage inspection. "Ryan, it's Carl Anderson, from the HOA board. I wanted to talk to you about what happened with Barbara." "Is she okay?" "She's stable. It was a heart attack, but they got to her in time. She's going to be in the hospital for a while and then she'll need recovery time." "That's good. I'm glad she's okay." "Ryan, the board has been talking. Actually, most of the board is gone. It was basically just me and Barbara and one other guy who moved away last year but was still technically on the board. With Barbara out of commission, it's basically just me." "Okay." The other residents have been calling me. A lot of them. Talking about everything that's been going on. The fines, the harassment, the way Barbara's been running things. And they've been talking about what you did, going out in that storm to help her even after everything she put you through. "I just did what anyone would do." "No, Ryan, not everyone would have done that. Most people would have told her to go to hell. You didn't." I didn't know what to say to that. "I'm calling a board meeting for Thursday evening. I'm inviting all residents. I think it's time we had a serious conversation about how this HOA is being run, and I'd like you to be there." Thursday evening, the community center was packed. Almost every resident showed up. Carl stood at the front, looking nervous but determined. "Thank you all for coming. I know the past few months have been difficult for a lot of people. Barbara's management style has been aggressive, to put it mildly. A lot of you have been hit with fines that seem excessive or arbitrary, and I want you to know that I hear you." He paused, looking around the room. "Barbara's going to be out of commission for a while. She'll be recovering for at least a few months, and honestly, I think when she's ready, she's going to step down from the board. She told me as much yesterday. She's realized that the stress of managing the HOA, combined with how she was approaching it, wasn't good for her health or for the community." There was murmuring through the room. "So here's what I'm proposing. We hold an emergency election for a new board, a full board, not just a president. 3 members, so decisions aren't made by just one person. We rewrite some of these bylaws that are too vague or too restrictive, and we implement a proper appeals process so residents have a voice when they disagree with a decision." "Who's going to run for the board?" someone called out. "That's up to all of you, but I'd like to nominate Ryan Whitmore." Every head in the room turned to look at me. I was so surprised I couldn't speak for a moment. "Ryan's shown the kind of character this community needs," Carl continued. "He's fair, he's reasonable, and he's willing to help people even when it costs him, even when they don't deserve it. That's who should be making decisions about how we live here." Mrs. Chen stood up. "I'll second that nomination, and I'll run for the board too. We need people who actually care about this community, not just about enforcing rules." Over the next hour, we organized everything. 3 people ended up running for the board. Me, Mrs. Chen, and a guy named Robert Daniels who'd lived in the community for 15 years and was level-headed and well-liked. The election was scheduled for the following week. It would be open to all homeowners, 1 vote per property. The week passed in a blur. People came up to me constantly, thanking me for what I'd done, expressing support for the board changes. A few people were skeptical, wondering if this would just lead to different problems. But mostly, people seemed hopeful. The election was held on a Tuesday evening. All 3 of us won our board seats, which made sense since there were only 3 positions. The real question was who would be president. We held our first board meeting that same night, just the 3 of us. "I don't want to be president," I said immediately. "I just want to make sure things are run fairly." "I'll do it," Mrs. Chen said, "but only if you 2 promise to keep me honest. I don't want to turn into Barbara." We all agreed. Mrs. Chen became president, Robert became treasurer, and I became secretary. Our first order of business was reviewing all the fines that had been issued over the past 6 months. It took 3 full meetings to go through everything. We ended up canceling about 70% of the fines, including all of mine. The ones we kept were legitimate violations that had clear evidence and had been issued with proper warning. Everything else was either too petty to enforce or had been issued without following proper procedure. We contacted everyone who'd paid fines and offered refunds. Some people accepted, some people told us to put it toward HOA expenses. All told, we refunded about $8,000. Then we tackled the bylaws. The recreational vehicle clause was rewritten to specifically exempt work vehicles, and to require that the HOA prove a vehicle is actually recreational before issuing violations. The noise ordinance was given specific parameters: no loud music or power equipment before 7 a.m., but ordinary vehicle operation was explicitly allowed. The commercial use clause was clarified to only apply to businesses that involved customer traffic or public-facing operations, not to storing work equipment. We also implemented a 3-strike system. First violation, written warning. Second violation, opportunity to meet with the board and explain. Third violation, fines, but only after proper documentation and appeals process, and we opened up all board meetings to residents. Not just open, but actively encouraged. We wanted input. We wanted people to feel like they had a voice. It wasn't perfect. There were still disputes, still disagreements about what rules should exist and how they should be enforced. But it was better. It was so much better. Barbara came home from the hospital about 3 weeks after her heart attack. I saw her a few days later walking slowly around her yard. I waved. She waved back, then came over to the property line. "Ryan, I wanted to thank you again for what you did. You already thanked me, I know, but I wanted to say it when I wasn't, dying." She tried to smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about how I was running things, about why I was so focused on rules and enforcement. You don't have to explain. I think I do. I retired 2 years ago. I'd been a project manager for 30 years, used to having control, used to having structure. When I became HOA president, I think I tried to run it the same way I ran my work projects. Everything needed to be perfect. Everyone needed to follow the rules exactly. I didn't see the people anymore. Just violations and compliance." I nodded, not sure what to say. "What you did for me, coming out in that storm after everything I'd put you through, it made me realize how far off track I'd gotten. You had every reason to refuse, but you didn't. That's who you are. And it's who I used to be before I let fear and control take over. I appreciate you saying that. I'm stepping down from the board permanently. I'm going to focus on my recovery and on trying to be a better neighbor. And I'm sorry, Ryan. I'm truly sorry for everything." "Apology accepted," I said. "And I meant it." She nodded, looking relieved, and walked back to her house. Life settled into a new normal after that. The HOA board met once a month, dealt with occasional minor issues, and mostly just helped people resolve disputes and maintain common areas. We weren't perfect, but we were fair and transparent, and that made all the difference. My business thrived. With my snowmobile accessible and the harassment gone, I was able to take on more clients. The county even offered me an official contract to be their backup for emergency snow removal situations. It wasn't just income. It was validation that what I did mattered. Mrs. Chen became a surprisingly good HOA president. She was organized without being tyrannical, firm without being inflexible. People actually started enjoying living in Cascade Ridge again. And me. I kept doing what I'd always done. Clearing snow, helping neighbors, trying to be a decent person in a world that sometimes made that difficult. One evening in late March, as the snow was finally starting to melt, I was sitting on my porch when Mrs. Chen walked over. "Ryan," the board was talking. "We wanted to officially recognize what you did, not just helping Barbara, but everything. Standing up to the abuse, organizing residents, pushing for change. You could have just paid the fines and kept your head down, but you didn't." "I couldn't afford to pay the fines," I said with a smile. "You know what I mean. Anyway, we're putting a plaque up in the community center. Ryan Whitmore, Community Member of the Year, and we're waiving your HOA dues for the next 3 years. You don't have to do that. We want to. You saved this neighborhood, Ryan, not just from the snow, from itself." I didn't know what to say. I'm not good with compliments or recognition. But I appreciated it more than I could express. "Thank you," I finally managed. She patted my shoulder and walked away, leaving me sitting there watching the sun set over the half-melted snow. I thought about everything that had happened. The harassment, the impound, the fight with Barbara, the storm, the board election. All of it had been exhausting and frustrating and at times felt completely overwhelming. But we'd gotten through it. We'd made things better, and that's really all you can do, isn't it? When systems are broken, when people abuse power, when things seem hopeless, you do what you can. You stand up. You help your neighbors. You refuse to let the bullies win. I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy who plows driveways and happened to be in the right place at the right time to make a difference. But maybe that's enough. The spring came, and with it, a sense of renewal. The snow melted. The roads cleared. People started spending time outside again, talking to each other, building the kind of community that should have existed all along. Barbara ended up moving about 6 months later. Not because anyone forced her out, but because she decided she needed a fresh start somewhere warmer, somewhere with less stress. She apologized to me one more time before she left, and we parted on good terms. The new homeowner who bought her house was a young couple with a baby. They were friendly and considerate and fit right into the neighborhood. They even hired me to clear their driveway, which felt like some kind of cosmic justice. I'm still on the HOA board, still serving as secretary, helping make decisions, trying to keep things fair and reasonable. It's not exciting work, but it matters. It keeps neighborhoods from turning into the kind of toxic nightmare that Barbara created, and I still have my snowmobile. It sits in my garage most of the year, ready for when winter comes and the snow starts falling. Because that's what I do. I clear the snow, I help people get where they need to go, and I make sure that when someone needs help, I'm there. Even if there's someone who hasn't been kind to me, even if it costs me something, even if it's difficult, because that's what community is supposed to be. Not rules and enforcement and petty power games, but people helping people, showing up for each other, being better than our worst impulses. I learned that the hard way, fighting an HOA president who'd forgotten that basic truth. But I learned it, and I'll carry it with me for the rest of my life. The snow will come again. It always does. And when it does, I'll be ready. Not just with a plow and a snowmobile, but with the knowledge that even the worst situations can be changed if you're willing to stand up and do something about it. That's my story. It's not dramatic or glamorous. It's just the truth about what happened when an HOA towed my snowmobile and didn't realize I was the only reliable plow driver for miles. They thought they were enforcing rules. They didn't understand they were attacking the person who kept the whole community running. But we figured it out. Together, and that made all the difference.